ongoing climate change calls for urgent action in both mitigation and adaptation. The 2018 Annual Climate Conference addresses these problems from 4 different perspectives: emission trading, carbon energy taxation, energy efficiency, renewable policies. We have plenary speakers for each of these topics, over 50 participants from all over the world, including 2 past presidents of the European Association of Environmental Resource Economists. I think this year the conference is particularly timely as the Conference of the Parties in Katowice is about to start. And the conference can give useful insight to decide what is the optimal decarbonization path to proceed and to apply the Paris Agreement in the future.
To reduce greenhouse gas emissions dramatically, which we desperately need to do, we have to innovate, that is, find completely new ways that dramatically reduce the costs of cutting carbon emissions. There are 2 examples from the States and from Europe. One, in the States, fracking has dramatically increased the use of gas because it's reduced its price. In Europe, of course, we've had dramatic increase in renewables because we also reduced the cost of renewables. But we need to widen that agenda much more intensely. And my big proposal is to bring new people who are not incumbents, that is to say new entrants, into the innovation space through venture capital and other instruments, and perhaps the Innovation Fund in Europe to transform our performance in Europe.
The impacts of climate change are going to be distributed unevenly across the globe. For example, under global warming, temperature will rise at different rates in different parts of the world. We know that in the North Pole, temperature rises faster than the equator, and this is bad not just for polar bears, but also for the rest of the world, because this kind of temperature differential creates issues like melting of ice, release of gases from permafrost, which will diffuse all over the world. We also know that poor countries are going to be hit harder from climate change than rich countries. This is because their production is vulnerable, mainly agriculture, to climate change, but also because their resources are less and they will not be able to undertake the appropriate adaptation to climate change, so they will not be able to protect themselves. In this plenary today, I tried to present a relatively new line of research which incorporates special structures into the macroeconomic models of climate change. The purpose was to bring closer climate science and economic science, to make mechanisms that drive impacts, vulnerabilities, and damages from climate change more transparent, and also to help provide more insights into the design of efficient climate policies, not only in terms of mitigation, but also of adaptation, which I think will be very important in the future if we cannot attain the 1.5 or 2 degrees of Celsius target.
Today I'm here to talk about energy efficiency. Energy efficiency is a very attractive aspect of climate policy because it allows policymakers to look at the decoupling of economic growth, which makes us wealthier and richer, and environmental impacts that destroy the environment. So having a tool that allows us to decouple these 2 trends is very attractive for policymakers. However, what I'm looking at is the energy efficiency gap. So the fact that despite the availability of cost-effective technologies, firms don't seem to adopt this technology quite as much as we would hope for. And the two pieces of work that I present today show 2 things mostly. One, that firms do not operate at the efficient frontier in the sense that they are not as efficient and rational as we would like, and this is something that we need to take into account when designing policy. And the second aspect is that technical change comes from both invention and diffusion, and we need to take both factors into account when we design policy.
the transition between conventional energy sources, fossil fuel-based energy sources, and renewable energy. A key ingredient in this transition is the stock, the capacity of renewable energy production that emerges over time, is motivated by, among other things, the relative advantage associated with producing renewable energy, the costs associated with it, and so forth. One of the things that we find is that moving from a model in which we have what you might call a laissez-faire approach to this particular transition to one in which we dictate either relatively slower or relatively faster transitions has unintended consequences.
My talk is about ex post evaluation of the EU emissions trading scheme. We are currently conducting 2 research projects that estimate empirically how the ETS affected industrial performance and emissions at regulated firms. To this end, we use panel data on manufacturing establishments in France and Germany. We estimate the effect of the EU ETS by looking at outcomes at the regulated firms and how they changed when the policy is introduced, and then compare that to the respective change observed at unregulated firms. In this way, we measure that French regulated firms reduced their emissions by 13% on average compared to the year 2000 emissions. And this change is brought about mainly by a switch out of fossil fuel use, generation of electricity on site that is very carbon intensive, and these firms instead purchase more electricity off the grid. What our findings further suggest is that this way of complying with the EU ETS is not too costly for 2 reasons. The first reason is that we don't measure any impact on value added or detrimental impact on employment. And the second reason is that these significant emissions reductions occurred in a time when the carbon price was moderate to low.
I really enjoyed the conference and the lively debate among scholars that did emerge in these days. For more information, please visit our website. Other events are in the pipeline. Stay connected.